This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Valentin.
Welcome back, everyone, to the BraveCo podcast. Today, I'm going to do a solo podcast, and I had this phrase on my mind for a little while now, and I wanted to just talk about it today. It's basically this. This is the phrase that popped into my head the other day. There are blessings and curses in life, and in the moment, it's almost impossible to tell which one is which. The important thing is to not let either one of them define you. So the other day, that literally popped into my mind. There are blessings and there are curses in life. And in the moment, it's almost impossible to tell which one is which. The important thing is to not let either one of them define you. Man, I'll tell you, the more I've been thinking about that and looking at my own life, the more I just am so sure that that's real and that's true. And I think that this is one of the keys to turning pain into strength in your life. We all know that life is challenging, right? And there are so many things that we go through in life. And so often we look at our current circumstances and judge our life based upon our current circumstances. So for instance, if you're making lots of money and doing really great, man, life is amazing. It looks like this massive blessing. And I've seen so many times where what was intended to be good, a benefit, a blessing for a man, turn out to be his downfall, his demise. In a lot of counseling appointments, I help men who are very successful financially untangle the web of business has become my marriage, right? And it looks like this thing should be a massive blessing in their life, and it's turning out to be this giant curse. Now, we both would know that it's not the business's fault. It's what's going on inside the man. On the same note, I can look at my own life and look at the different places that looked like a curse in my life, from my nervous breakdown to my divorce to 7 years of infertility and a miscarriage with my wife. And I just look at those years, and in the middle of those years, my life felt like my life was cursed. I mean, honestly, it felt like my divorce. I just felt like I've tried so hard. I've done all these things. I've lived my life to the best of my ability, and my marriage fails. Like, that just feels like this massive curse. Or my nervous breakdown. I lost use of my arms. I've said it so many times here. I'm so tired of talking about it, but it felt like this massive curse. At one point, I was even so angry at God. Why have you left me? Why does my life end up like this? Why do I have all this anxiety? I don't feel like I deserve this or earn this, right? Self-pity is coming in, talking. It felt like this massive curse. And when I look back at my life, I now can see a different perspective. I have this picture of what my divorce, the gift that actually came to me because of that, the strength, the resilience, but even more than that, the marriage that I have today, right, with my wife today is incredible. Not because I had to go through that divorce, but because of what I did and the changes that I made and how the Lord's used that to help me build a healthy, strong, resilient marriage. And honestly, who I am today as a husband because of what I went through, and a father because of what I went through. That divorce completely changed my life. When I look at my nervous breakdown now, I always say, gosh, I would never, if I could go back in time, I would never go further than 2009 if I had to relive that again, because it was just so debilitating and horrible. Honestly, it was worse for me than my divorce because I felt so out of control. But when I look back at what the gift that gave me, it gave me this mental strength, honestly, that I didn't know was possible. I wrote a book. I wrote the second half of my book, Winning the War Within, without using my hands because I couldn't type anymore. And that was 2009. And it was just like this incredible obstacle that I felt like I didn't know that I was capable, right, of doing that. And I look at the things that it's given me now, right, where I help these other men and women through their breakdowns, through their pain. I helped them not get to that spot. Anyway, it's just been this massive blessing. And the infertility for my wife and I was just probably, honestly, one of the longest standing, most painful places in our life, because Lauren's dream was to be a mom, was to have a baby. And she was a mom when she married me, but she wanted to carry her own baby. That's been her childhood dream. And so going on a 7-year infertility journey after I'd had a vasectomy reversal, which is incredibly painful, but going through that and year after year after year, thinking like, this is a year when we're going to get pregnant. This is a year that it's going to happen. We have all these prophetic words surrounding like the family that we're building and the promises and the legacy. And 5 years into our infertility journey, trying everything, she gets pregnant on Father's Day, and 10 weeks later, we miscarry the baby. And there's just so much confusion and so much pain. And once again, we feel like we're in this moment in life where this is just this massive curse. Fast forward, when Lauren and I look back at those 7 years of infertility and look at not just what God did in our life, but actually, because now we're raising little kids. I have a 4-year-old and I have a 2-year-old. And we've had this conversation so many times. Like, if we would have had our kids, our young kids, while we were trying to raise our older kids and blending the family, it would have been so hard. Could we have done it? Probably. But it was like God's mercy and his grace, not to keep her from getting pregnant, but he used all of that. And I don't know, honestly, God's such a mystery. I don't know that he didn't keep her from, I don't know. It's like, so, right. I don't claim to understand God. I don't think that he killed our baby for sure. He's much better than that, but it's in his mercy and his grace that we look back and go, oh my gosh, if we would have added to our family in those years, it would have been so incredibly challenging. Our inability to be able to decipher what God's going to do with where we're at oftentimes leads us to so much bitterness, resentment, frustration, pain, anger. And we end up missing out on what the whole thing was intended for, how God's going to use it. There's this incredible story in the Bible in Genesis 37, and it's a story about Joseph. Now, I'm not going to tell the whole entire story. You should really go read it, because it's such an awesome picture of this young man who was born into this big family. And Jacob was his father. Jacob was a great man. He had an encounter with God, and where God changed his name. And it's just such a cool story. Jacob's got a crazy past, but he ends up, he marries Leah and has, I think, 7 sons or 7 children with Leah. Forgive me if I don't get it perfectly right. And then he marries Rachel, which Rachel is Jacob's beloved. Jacob was originally trying to marry Rachel, but Rachel's dad ended up giving him Leah. It's a whole confusing story. You really should go back and read it. But Rachel has a son, and his name is Joseph. And he was the last son to Rachel. And so Joseph was Rachel's favorite. And so you could already tell, imagine this, there's a family full of boys. Joseph is the second to the last son that's born. He's the favorite. And to make it even worse, Rachel gives Joseph this coat, this really cool coat, this coat of many colors. So you could just imagine the rivalry, the pain, the anger, the frustration. Not only is Rachel the favorite wife, but he's the favorite son. He's got this really cool coat. And kind of to make it worse, it's like God favored him in a way that maybe he didn't favor all the other sons, where Joseph started having these dreams that the dreams are really cryptic, but basically what it looks like is the sun and the moon and all these sheaves of wheat are bowing down to him. And his interpretation is that my family is going to bow down to me. And I don't know that it was necessarily meant in arrogance. He was just like, I'm really favored. But anyways, it's the arrogance of a young man to go and share that, what God had shared to him, like, hey, I'm going to make you great. I'm going to give you authority in your family. I'm going to bless you. Well, he shares that with his brothers, and it just throws them over the edge. His brothers they're so angry. They hate him. So one day when they're out working in the field, tending the sheep, they take Joseph captive and they throw him in a pit. His brothers do. And they scheme to kill him. They're going to kill him. And there's a couple of his brothers that just couldn't quite settle in themselves killing Joseph. And so they talked their other brothers into selling him into slavery. There was the slave trade was going through their city or their town or whatever, close to them. And so they ended up selling Joseph to slavery. Well, they took his coat of many colors and they tore it up and they put blood on it and they brought it back to Jacob, his father. And they said that Joseph had been killed, I think by a lion, wild animal, whatever. And so for years, Jacob thought that he had lost his son. And it was this big drama. Jacob's super sad. Well, meantime, Joseph was sold into slavery to Pharaoh. Hopefully, guys, this story isn't getting too long or too hard to follow, but it's a great story. So he gets sold into slavery to Pharaoh. He works his way up into the ranks of Pharaoh. Into favor. The way that he handles himself, the way that he takes care of Joseph's not just properties, but the way he serves as a slave is like head and shoulders above the rest. And what ends up happening is Pharaoh's giving him more and more and more favor. Well, Pharaoh's wife wants to sleep with Joseph, but Joseph is this man of character, and he keeps rejecting Pharaoh's wife. Well, Pharaoh's wife doesn't like to be rejected. And she ends up framing Joseph as if Joseph slept with her. And she goes and tells her husband, and Joseph ends up getting thrown into prison. Now, Joseph spends a lot of time in prison. I can't remember how long. But while he's in prison, he works so diligently, so excellently, that they put him over the other prisoners. Oh, this is really cool. So you can just see this guy, right? Like Joseph, no matter what scenario he gets thrown into, he's born, he's a favored son. He's supposed to have this awesome family and life. He gets thrown into prison like I'm talking about. Like Joseph just keeps overcoming. He gets favor with Pharaoh while he's a slave. Gets sabotaged. He goes to prison. And my dad always says, like when you have good character, you make a prison a palace, right? You have the ability to make a prison a palace. That's the story of Joseph. So Joseph gets thrown into prison. He does so good he has such a good attitude, but the leadership that he possesses, that he shows there, is so good that the jailer puts him over all the other prisoners. Okay, well, what happens in prison is there's a baker that comes to him, and there's a cupbearer that comes to him that are in prison. And Joseph's been there for a long time, and they both have these dreams that they don't know how to interpret. Well, that's one of Joseph's superpowers. And when the cupbearer tells his dream to Joseph, Joseph interprets it. And he basically says to him that the king, in 3 days, the king's going to let you out, and you are going to get reinstated back into your place. And the baker comes to Joseph and tells him his dream. And Joseph says to him, in 3 days, the king, you are going to be killed. And exactly what Joseph said took place. So Joseph, in 3 days, the cupbearer was restored to his place. And what Joseph told the cupbearer is, don't forget about me. When you get restored back into your place, remember that I'm here. Well, you can imagine what happens. The cupbearer gets restored back to his place with the king, and he forgets about Joseph. So Joseph spends 2 more years in prison, right? Just hanging out, doing nothing, and, rotting away. And all of a sudden, time goes by. Pharaoh has a dream. And he has this dream that no one can interpret. I'm not going to go into the full dream, but he has this dream that no one can interpret. And it jars the cupbearer's memory. He goes, oh my gosh, there's this guy in prison. His name's Joseph. You need to meet him. He interpreted my dream. So that's how Joseph gets reinstated back in. Joseph comes back. He interprets Pharaoh's dream, and the dream is accurate. Not only is it accurate, but Pharaoh sees so much wisdom, so much authority, so much excellence in him that he reinstates Joseph back to his place of authority and puts him over his resources. And so Joseph, one of the things that happens is Joseph sees that there's a 7 years of prosperity coming on Egypt, and then 7 years of famine and drought. And so Joseph gives this strategy, and he says, you need to store up for 7 years because God's going to pour out tons of blessings. Store the grain that you get, store the resources, and then sell it back to the people. And it's going to provide sell it back to foreign lands and countries, and it's going to make you super wealthy. And he's trying to set you up for success. That's exactly what happened. Well, while this is happening, Joseph, so the 7 years of prosperity happens, and then the 7 years of famine, the people are just getting crushed. And from all over the place, people are coming to the king to get their resources, right? Well, Joseph's brothers, years have gone by, and Jacob sends Joseph's brothers to Egypt to get grain because they need it. They need food. They need resources. While they're there, Joseph recognizes his brothers. But his brothers don't necessarily recognize him. And through a long story short, Joseph has mercy on his brothers, and he takes care of them. He gives them grain. He blesses them. He sends them back with all these goods to bring to their father. And when they go back, Joseph says, I want to see my father. Well, his dad's getting old. He says, I want to see my father, bring him back, but don't tell him I'm alive. And Jacob makes the long trek back to Egypt, and Joseph gets reinstated with his father, which is just an incredible story. This is an incredible story. What's really interesting is Jacob lives for, I think, 17 more years. Joseph sets him up with food, sets him up with all this prosperity, all this blessing. After Joseph's father, dies, his brothers get afraid. They get really afraid that Joseph is going to punish them, that he's going to be angry with them. And he says this one thing. Basically, I've told you this whole story to come to this one line. He says in Genesis 50:20, which this is like the verse for where we're at right now. He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. What you intended for harm, God intended for good, to accomplish what is now being done, to save the lives of many. Okay, what's the point? There are blessings and there are curses in life. And in the moment, it's almost impossible to tell which one is which. Joseph's greatest challenges, he went to the pit, he got sold into slavery, he got falsely accused, he got thrown into prison, he gets out, he's betrayed by his brother, he's betrayed by the king's wife, he's forgotten about by the cupbearer, he spends years and years and years in prison in a horrible hellhole. And all the while, God is shaping a man. God is building a man. God is strengthening a man. God is building a warrior. He's building his character. He's building his gift mix. He's using it. Is that God's first plan for Joseph? Probably not. Did it follow the exact path that we would have all chosen for Joseph's life? Probably not. But God doesn't waste a hard day. God uses a hard day. And when I look at my life and I look at your life and I just think about where we're at today, you can look at your circumstances in one of two ways. You can go, man, all this crappy stuff's happened in my life. My marriage is tough. My relationship with my kids are hard. My job's challenging, whatever. And I'm just telling you, like, that's probably the place of greatest breakthrough and strength in your life. I have literally seen where an affair, I'm thinking of more than one couple right now, where the affair in their life was the catalyst to the marriage that they have been wanting the whole time. Now, am I saying that I'm thankful that they had an affair? Absolutely not. Am I saying that was God's plan? Nope. What I am saying is what looked like the biggest curse, what looked like the nail in the coffin, what looked like the end. I could, if I was allowed to do it, I could literally list off couple after couple after couple where they look back and go, I was just talking to a friend the other day. He said, I wouldn't change anything. This has been the biggest blessing that I've had in my life. I had a mediocre marriage before. Do we wish that you could change the circumstances so that you didn't have to go through that? Sure, maybe. But it's become this incredible place of blessing. And if we will put on eyes like Joseph and go, yeah, I don't know how I got in this pit. Yeah, I don't deserve this. Yeah, I don't deserve to be thrown in jail. Yeah, I don't deserve to be forgotten about. But I can't control that. What I can control is my hope levels. What I can control is doing everything that my hand finds to do with all my might. What I can control is not being a victim. What I can control is being powerful. I'm going to wake up today and seize the moment. Listen, man, 2025, we have this incredible opportunity every single day to go, what is the maximum potential that I can get out of today? You can look at your setbacks and go, I'm in a pit that I don't deserve. My family's betrayed me. Or you can go, the next opportunity for breakthrough is going to come from how I respond to being thrown in this pit. And you fill yourself with hope. There's a story of the rat with hope. I've talked about it before in this podcast, but it's really relevant for here. Hope is often the difference between your success and your death. Hope is. There's this study that was done. It's called the rat with hope, where a scientist took rats in the I believe it was in the 70s, and he put them in a bucket of circulating water. You can look it up. ChatGPT will be your friend here. He put a rat in a bucket of circulating water, and the rats would basically swim for just mere minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I think up to 15 minutes before they would drown. Well, what this scientist did is he started to save the rats right before they would drown completely. And he would dry them off and he'd arrest them. And then he'd put them back into that bucket of circulating water. Now, what's incredible is I would think that the rats would swim for less time. I would think they'd swim for 3 minutes and then give up, right? I'm back in this place that I got into before. Life sucks. That's not what happens. These rats, one rat, instead of swimming 15 minutes and giving up, could swim up to 60 hours. These rats could literally swim for up to 60 hours. What was his conclusion? His conclusion was that the rats were energized by hope. Somehow, some way, if I keep swimming, that mysterious hand will grab me and pull me out of this. Guys, the circumstance that you're in right now is your setup for success. God's not going to put you in a place where you don't ultimately end up on top, where you don't ultimately end up better than where you started. That's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. It's the story of David when Saul's chasing him. It's the story of so many different men in the Bible and women in the Bible. Is if you do what you can do, if you live life with hope and faith, it's God's promise is that he gives us beauty for ashes, that he makes all things new, that no matter what hand he's dealt, he always turns it around for good. And I think what holds us back is we do two things. One, we look at our circumstances and we allow that to dictate our decisions and our character and our hope levels and our faith levels. That is a recipe to keep, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? If you get in a hard spot and you think it's never going to change and you don't try your best and you don't wake up every day believing that you're going to make a big difference, that it's going to grow, that your marriage is going to get better, and you don't do that, the only logical explanation that's going to happen is life's going to get worse and you're going to go, see? So that's number one. Number two, sometimes we get into these spots where it feels impossible to move forward because of our past history is so real. It's so scary. Okay, to me, that's trauma. When I was in the 8th grade, I grew up in a very small town in a Christian school home. Sorry. I went to a Christian school, a very small town in a small home. I went to a Christian school that was 12 kids in my graduating 8th grade class. My parents, for graduation present, they took all of us 12 kids in a 15-passenger van, and we went from Weaverville, California, down to Great America, down to the Bay Area to Great America, Six Flags. And Six Flags, if you don't know what it is, it's a theme park. There's all kinds of really cool roller coaster rides, and it was awesome. I went there a lot as a kid with youth groups and all that stuff. On the way back, we were in this small little town called Dunnigan on I-5. We stopped to get gas and we left. Well, what ended up happening like 15 minutes after we left that small town of Dunnigan, this guy in an old beat up red and beige F-150 truck started to act really crazy. He would pull up behind us while we're on I-5 and he would get so close that you couldn't see his bumper. And then he would like try to ram us off of I-5. And as time went on, like, of course, at first my dad was like, what's wrong with this guy? And my dad ended up like speeding up and trying to lose him. Well, we couldn't lose him. We couldn't shake him. And it escalated. Like as time went on, like the guy would speed up in front of us, slam on his brakes and get us slowed all the way down to like 2 miles an hour. And literally traffic was backed up as far as you can see it. This was before cell phones were even a thing. This was like in 1994. So there's traffic backed up everywhere. And this guy would be literally his truck would be turned sideways on the freeway. And my dad would like speed around him and he'd try to ram us and he'd end up in the gravel. And then we'd go 120, 130 miles an hour down the freeway and think that we had lost him. And then the guy would like come speeding up 5 minutes later and he'd try to ram us from the back. This went on for an hour, literally for an hour. And people were trying to come and help us, like they'd use their car to shield us. And anyways, what ended up happening was there's this highway patrol that had pulled a guy over on the side of the road. And we sped past that cop at like 120 miles an hour. And then my dad, of course, when he saw that cop, he slammed on his brakes. This is the first cop we'd seen in an hour. He slams on his brakes and he starts backing up towards the cop. Well, the cop doesn't know what's going on. And he's obviously super alarmed. And that guy comes in this truck and is trying to ram my dad while my dad's backing up. So my dad puts it in drive and he starts driving back across the freeway because he's trying to avoid getting hit from this guy. I look back and the cop is running across the freeway trying to catch up to my dad. Then he realizes like, I'm not going to catch this car. So he jumps in his cop car and he starts speeding down the road, trying to get ahead of us. So we end up pulling over onto the other side of the freeway. We're in the median. And again, traffic's backed up for miles. As far as you can see, it's backed up for miles. The cop pulls in front of my dad. The guy in the truck jumps out of his truck and he runs behind the van, because now my dad stopped. He runs behind the van and he jumps onto the back of the van and he's got his hands up through the back windows. And all of us kids in the back are screaming. We're screaming the whole time. I mean, I'm literally holding my friend down because he's trying to jump out. He'd lost his mind. He's trying to jump out of the van. He was so tormented. And so what is happening is the girls in the back of the van are screaming, he's trying to kill us. He's trying to kill us. We thought that he had a gun. And so my dad throws it in drive, and he's trying to drive forward to shake the guy off the back of the van. Well, the cop's parked in front of my dad, like 30 yards in front. And the cop has his pistol out and pointing his pistol at my dad, yelling, "Stop or I'm going to shoot." Meanwhile, the guy hanging on the back of the truck or back of the van, the bad guy, is yelling, "They have my kids. They kidnapped my kids." It's chaos. It's so chaotic. So the cop thinks that my dad is driving a van full of stolen kids, kidnapped kids, and the cop is about to shoot my dad. Now this is the cop story. He said, "I was about to pull the trigger and something said stop." Well, my dad is looking in the rearview mirror and he literally comes to and realizes I'm about to run over this cop, and he stops. And so my dad gets arrested. The guy gets arrested. Of course, there's a billion witnesses that are able to go, "Hey, this guy's been trying to run them off the road for an hour." The cop made us all get out of the car, which is so traumatic. The girls were so scared that we were all scared that, because the guy's yelling, "He's got my kid." And we're like, we are not his kids. Anyways, what happened from this, my whole point, is this created such a traumatic experience in me. I didn't know how to talk about that event afterwards. I'm 14 years old, that I just shoved it down inside. I literally just shoved it down. And for the next year and a half, every car that pulled up behind me, well, whether I was driving or someone else was driving, when I got my license at 15, I would get so scared that someone was following me, that they were going to chase me, they were going to run me off the road. It was traumatic. It was literally so traumatic that it became my reality. And honestly, it was one of the things that caused so much stress and anxiety in my life. It began to run my life. And it wasn't until it's not until you start unpacking trauma that it really begins to change. Why I bring this up is, when you're struggling with trauma, like deep trauma, it's not like you don't have enough faith for it to change. It's not like you don't have enough hope for it to change. It's not like you're not trying hard enough. The problem with trauma is that you're reliving what happened in the past today. And the reason why I make that distinction is it's what happened to the Israelites. The Israelites, 400 years in slavery, they get freed. They wander the desert around the mountain for 40 years. God sends them a fire by night, cloud by day. He's protecting them. Their clothes don't wear out. He's giving them manna. He's feeding them. They're supposed to go into the promised land. They can't make the change. Why? Because of the trauma from the past. 400 years of slavery. They thought like a slave. They were in bondage inside of themselves. It goes much deeper than just, I'm in a bad circumstance. It's much deeper than my business is suffering. It's much deeper than, man, my kids I'm in a hard time with my kids. When you're struggling with ongoing long-term trauma, it's not just that you're fighting hopelessness. You're in a battle fighting that story that is more real than what you're facing currently today. And to me, the reason why I bring that up is that how we heal trauma is by talking through it, processing through it, getting God's thoughts on it. Trauma is I experienced something, I experienced too much, too quick, too soon, too traumatic, too overwhelming, and I don't know how to process it. I don't know where to put it. I don't know how to make sense of it. And so for a lot of us, you've tried to have enough faith. You've tried to pray enough. You've tried to will yourself forward, but you're stuck in this cycle of trauma. And I want to encourage you that if you've done all that you've known to do to like have faith, to build, to move forward, but you can't, go down the route of getting some help to heal some trauma in your life. If you've identified it, like, yes, there was some sexual abuse in my life. There was this crazy traumatic experience. The way I grew up was, whatever. I'm not trying to like go on a witch hunt. I'm trying to help bring some freedom. On the other side, it's back to there's blessings and there's curses in life. And in the moment, it's almost impossible to tell which one is which. The important thing is to not let either one of them define you. You are not your trauma. You're not your worst day. You are not what happened to you. You are not, right? I'm not going to let that define me. I'm not going to let the challenge of dealing with trauma my whole life define my future. I get to choose. To me, this whole podcast episode is about being powerful, leading your life with hope and with faith, and taking the necessary steps to address the painful places in your life. My nervous breakdown didn't get better all on its own. It literally took me going, okay, I am strong. I am not weak. I'm not fragile. I am agile. I'm not broken. I'm going to take a step day by day by day, little by little by little. My marriage got stronger because I took a look at, man, I'm so scared that this marriage is going to turn out like my last marriage. Okay, I've got to heal from that trauma, but also I have to lead my life now in a way where I'm adding tools, I'm adding skills. I'm being proactive with what's been given to me. Today, what we're going through, these challenges, these obstacles are opportunities for us to create a place of blessing in our life. And I just want to pray with you today. If this is you, if you're looking at a place in your life where you go, man, this is such a painful place. I've been looking at my circumstances as like a curse, as where's the blessing in my life? I just want to inject hope into you and go like, this isn't the end of your story. This isn't the end of your life. What the enemy intended for evil, God is turning around for good. And he's going to bless you like he did Joseph, like he's done in my life. So God, I thank you for each man that's sitting here today, Lord, that's going, this painful place, this place that I've tried so many times. Lord, would you come and show them what you're going to do in their life? Lord, would you come and give them a clear pathway out? Would you come and bring strength to the place where there's frustration, where there's pain, where there's weakness? Lord, would your mercy be so abundant and their grace be so abundant in their life? God, what you've done in my life, would you impart to them? In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thanks so much for listening to this podcast episode. If it's encouraged you, if it's blessed you, would you please share it with a friend? Like and subscribe to our podcast. It helps so much. Guys, I will see you next week. Stay brave. Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, you are already behind. Go ahead and click right here to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch last week's episode. And listen, if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, you can check out some of our new hats that we have in stock and all our other swag. Go to braveco.org and you can look at our store there. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.